Okay, I'm here with Danny Morrison, and I'm going to be talking to Danny about Brexit. So thanks very much, Danny, for giving me your time. Maybe we could start with a general question. Is Brexit really all that important, or in the long run, say 5 years, 10 years' time, will there really be any difference to most people's lives?
Well, I think it's extremely important. I think it's going to affect the people on both sides of the border. It's going to affect, obviously, Britain, and it's going to affect the future of the European Union as well, because it's going to feed into the right-wing xenophobia that already exists in some of the rising parties within Europe. Here, and I mean, I know people have been cautioning against people making bizarre warnings, etc. But I also think there's a great danger that if, for example, there's an attempt made to introduce border controls here, I mean, you can imagine the way that would escalate. If they put up a post, somebody will attack it. If they try to stop people, there could be a protest march. People could get injured. It could escalate. And there's absolutely no way, I think, that the people around the border regions, and I would include in that, and have anecdotal evidence that a lot of unionists also are quite worried about the effects of it in terms of cross-border trade.
I can see how it'd be an inconvenience for cross-border trade, but then, there'd be inconvenience trading with the EU anyway. But you seem to be suggesting that it might involve violence and people, because, I mean, you and I are old enough to remember the time before the Troubles, and you had to stop and get your passport, your whatever it was, stamped and so on. They'd ask you what you'd got. But that didn't create friction, or there wasn't.
Yeah, but we've gone through many things that have happened since then. I mean, effectively, there's the border's invisible. You don't see the border. Many people have all of the roads have been opened, the bridges have been rebuilt again. People have a free movement, and people will want to have that free movement. People aren't going to like getting stopped at 8 o'clock in the morning if that's what it requires, and producing passports, because Britain is concerned about what they call welfare tourists, or indeed what is really happening is that people who, largely as a result of Western policies, have been impoverished and have been reduced to flee in their own country as a result of war, which the West has been implicated in, if not indeed involved in starting.
I think I saw something from you on Twitter about maybe asking for passports if you were moving from the north to the south.
They could be asking for identification. Of course they would. What are the way they're going to prove people's identity?
How do you feel about that?
And I wouldn't be shown my passport. Absolutely no way. And I would encourage other people to do the same.
Why not?
Why should we be going backwards? I mean, what we want and our aspirations are to unify this island and to unpartition the damage that was done here from 1921. And this would be a backward step. Now, of course, I can see some right-wing extreme unionists enjoying the prospect of, in their mind, the border being reinforced and it becoming much more clearly demarcated, physically and in terms of legally. But I mean, that would be, to me, that would be a step backwards. But for other reasons, of course, I think that the European Union. I was originally opposed to it back in the 70s. I campaigned against it in 1975. We boycotted the 1979 election. But since then, over the years, the way trends have been within Europe, I think it has been fairly beneficial. The peace 1, 2, 3 money is totaled 1.5 billion that have been given to projects here since 1995, 96. That is to continue until 2020. The trade from the south of Ireland to England is worth 1.5 billion weekly, and of course a lot of the people in England, I do believe, for example, that England would survive it. There would be obviously a period where GDP might fall, sterling would be affected, and that of course is going to affect. In Germany, for example, there's 100,000 expats, and if sterling falls in value, their pensions are going to fall in value. They're going to be hurt as well. So, I think that England is thinking very much of itself. It has been driven to the right on this issue, by and large, in most of the debates and conversations that take place. The first item on the agenda is immigration. But there's been many, many studies, academic studies, and by economists also, to show that, in fact, over a period of time, immigration enriches a country. And there's Germany. I was in Germany last year and saw the refugees arriving. Germany took in almost 1 million people last year, which I think is extraordinary.
But then there was a backlash against Merkel for doing that.
That is correct, but she has successfully, staved that off. and over a period of time, those people will be absorbed. I was in North Germany, and kids that had come into the country 6 months earlier were into the school and were appearing in the classrooms where I was speaking.
I got a question the other day, where in fact it was this morning, and a guy asked me which would be the quickest route to United Ireland, to vote for Brexit or to vote to remain.
Well,
What would you say to answer that?
this feeds into an argument that was presented about 4 weeks ago by the Irish economist David McWilliams, who also spoke at a Fell and Fubble event Tuesday or Wednesday a week ago. And what he was saying is that with Scotland, the likelihood of Scotland, the likelihood of Wales, and probably the likelihood of the 6 counties as well, I believe a majority voting to remain. But given the fact that we are outvoted and dominated by the English state of some 50 million plus, that this could lead to and could trigger immediately or in the near future another Scottish referendum at which independence would this time be won, and that could lead to the beginning of the breakup of quote unquote the UK. But I think that the damage that would be done in terms of the immigration controls at the border, if there's an attempt to impose border controls, I don't see a Brexit leading immediately or in the short term or in the long term to a United Ireland. I think that is a work in progress. It's going to take a lot of work in terms of working on the 26 counties as well, and Sinn Féin's trying to break that down. You have a situation there where the media and the politicians are very comfortable with partition and increasingly refer to Ireland when they mean the 26 county state, or as it's properly called, the Republic of Ireland. And we have to argue against that. That to me is that subliminal partitioning.
Yeah, but that's a slightly separate matter. I mean, if you had Brexit, and if you had, as you've suggested, a majority in Scotland, for example, wanting to be in Europe, it's quite likely they might vote for a second referendum, or go for a second referendum, and it's also quite likely that they might win it this time. And if that happened, the UK would then be Wales, maybe, and the north of Ireland. So you get the feeling that you might have an upsurge of English nationalism, and that the UK as we know it would cease to exist. In which case, surely that would hasten the day for United Ireland.
Well, I mean, if that proves to be the case, yes, well and good.
You don't think that would work? That would work out?
Well, we'll put it like this here. The British public. I mean, if I was a unionist here, I'd be ashamed of this, and I'm not ashamed of it as a nationalist because, as far as I'm concerned, it's reparation for historic wrong done to Ireland. But Britain is paying a subsidy of 11 billion annually a year here, and already would have imagined if that was the case, if people were saying, "Look, we're spending 11 billion, let's cut that there." Now they haven't done it. They haven't done that yet. Although I would argue that I would want them to do that in line with us reuniting Ireland by agreement over a period of time, where we try to harmonise as much as possible and cut down risk, etc. But I do not see even Scotland leaving how that necessarily is going to trigger, an outgrowth of nationalism solely in England, and where they say, right, let's now get rid of Wales or the north of Ireland. It hasn't happened in 80 years, despite the costs of running the UK. So why would it suddenly happen now?
So you don't feel that if someone was to vote for Remain, or if Remain was to succeed, that would necessarily impede this movement towards a United Ireland?
No, and I find it ironic that some people on the left, like People Before Profit and Urige and some of the other micro groups that are opposed to Sinn Féin and very critical of the power sharing assembly and executive at Stormont, that they're voting for, they're calling for Brexit, and their understanding is that they think it is going to actually achieve the scenario that you've laid out there, and I don't believe it is, because I think the greater danger is, of course, is that the border becomes much more prominent, and that there are an attempt. If, for example, if Brexit wins, and you've got Boris Johnson as the British Prime Minister, do we think that Boris Johnson is going to be generous towards looking at? He's going to look in terms of, well, I got elected here on the basis of blocking immigration and on the blocking of attacking the European Union, and the only territory where I directly share with the European Union is the border between the north and south of Ireland. Do people think that he's just going to let that remain that way? I don't think so.
Well, there's been some people who've said that if there was a Brexit, that actually Britain would kind of turn a blind eye to the question of the border and say immigrants making their way through the south into Britain via the north, so to speak. That they might let that just happen and concentrate their guarding of the line at the airports and the ports of Britain itself.
Well, of course, the unionists won't like that, if they're asked to go through another set of tests to enter England. But of course, if you look at it from the security position, they will want to ensure, because Britain, because of its involvement in the destruction of Libya, its involvement in the Iraq War and other damage that it's done in the Middle East, it is, of course, a target for ISIL. So it would need to be protecting